found a great partner in Saxby Chambliss, who's a very conservative Republican senator from Georgia. And we started sitting down and saying, you know, we got to do something. You know, if kind of regular order of business, which would be, we're not going to do anything major on this issue until after the presidential election. You know, it was our conclusion that we might not have until after the presidential election to deal with this issue. So we started meeting, we started bringing in other senators, we brought in Bernanke, we brought in a series of economists and financial experts, and really started educating ourselves and our colleagues on what was at stake at this issue. The Simpson-Bowles Commission came out, and you know, there was something in there for everybody to hate, but it also took $4 trillion off of the deficit, and there were 4 senators on that commission who voted for it. And they range from very conservative Tom Coburn to very liberal Dick Durbin. And those 4 and the 2 of us came together on so-called Gang of 6. And we have been working now for 4.5 months on trying to see, can we put a plan out there that will slightly ask shared sacrifice of everyone. Make sure that everybody's got a little skin in it. Because if we approach this issue the way we approach the government shutdown or all the other issues that are going on in Washington, Democrat versus Republican, the political brinksmanship, we could have an absolute catastrophe. Because unlike the government shutdown, where you can wait until the 11th and a half hour before you make a deal, and while we frankly probably cost more money than we saved on the cuts because so many businesses, and probably some in this room, had to shut down their operations and then restart, you can get through that. You can't wait to the 11th and a half hour on a debt crisis. And you can't predict when it's going to happen. But if we have a debt crisis and interest rates go up to 12%, any economic recovery goes out the window. So, our premise has been everything has to be on the table. And that means, as a Democrat, I got to be willing to look at entitlement programs. It means, as a Republican, we got to look at the revenue side. Now, the way we're looking at the revenue side is different than traditional. It's been, how can we do this through tax reform, actually lowering rates, but not eliminating, but cutting back on a lot of the tax expenditures, both on the personal side and on the corporate side. And I put this slide, particularly for some of my Democratic friends who say, oh, well, you know, Social Security is, you know, really not that much in trouble, and you know, it's not bankrupt yet. 2037, Social Security goes, you'll have an immediate 22% across the board cut. And it's fascinating, Social Security, when the original retirement age, you know who set the original retirement age at 65? It was Bismarck when he was premier of Germany back in the 1870s, and he set it at 65 because average life expectancy was mid-50s. So giving you a check if you outlived the actuarial tables wasn't bad. Even Roosevelt, when he said 65 in 1934, life expectancy was 62. Now we're at 80, and as some of the breakthrough drugs that we're talking about and opportunities that are happening in this corridor take place, it may be 90. It's just math. This one, 1950, there were actually 16, but 17 workers for every 1 retiree. Today there are 3. In a few years it'll be 2 to 1. This isn't Democrats' fault. This isn't Republicans' fault. It's just math, and one of the reasons why the idea that we can punt on these problems is just, I don't believe, appropriate. Next slide. Now, this is also important. This is important. I'm going on too long. I apologize, but you know, I hear from businesses, particularly, guys, you know, you got to lower the corporate rates, and you're right. America's corporate tax rate at 35% is one of the highest in the world. But I also have to tell you, if you're part of a major Fortune 200 company and you're paying 35% corporate rates, fire your CFO. Because most major American corporations have effective tax rates that are really more in the mid-teens. And the only people who pay 35% are probably some of you, because you're small to mid-sized businesses or you're in the retail side and you don't have the kind of tax advantages that some of the larger companies have. And even with that, if you look at corporate taxes as a share of our revenue base, it is a declining number. So one of the things we're talking about doing is lowering that corporate tax rate from mid-30s to kind of, mid to high 20s. But again, it's going to come at the cost of trying to get rid of some of these tax expenditures, tax breaks, not all of them. I'm going to preserve parts of the R&D tax credit and certain other things. But it will mean that the tax rates that are out there, businesses actually aren't paying. We ought to not read about one of the world's largest companies who make $40 billion and pay $0 in taxes. There needs to be a sense of fairness to this. Next slide.